This week on the agenda, what is resilient growth and how can we achieve it? We're in Geneva at the World Economic Forum Growth Summit 2023. The global economy has been weakened by a series of crises. COVID-19, conflicts, high inflation, distress in the banking sector. Growth remains sluggish, but despite deepening tensions geopolitically and the cost of living crisis remaining acute around the world, there are some growth hotspots. So which countries are driving growth and investment over the next decade? At the World Economic Forum's Growth Summit 2023 in Geneva, I spoke to Mmusi Kgafela, Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry of Botswana, the President of Turkey's Investment Office, Burak, Dağlioğlu, and Karen Harris, Managing Director of the Macro Trends Group at Bain & Co. As we speak, there is such an uncertain economic backdrop, isn't there? I mean, is your outlook for the global economy still doom and gloom, or are things going to perk up a bit in 2023?
I think there's a lot of room for improvement. We shouldn't look at it as altogether doom. When we look at, for instance, our entry into the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, which is the largest since the WTO was formed, the whole objective of it is to integrate the rest of Africa from Cairo to Cape, so that we could then jointly grow together. There are many other regional agreements that we have in Southern Africa. For instance, we have the Southern African Customs Union and the SADC agreement. I think, if we properly implement those agreements and collaborate with one another, there is plenty of room for growth. And Africa is the new market. It's a market which has not been exploited before. It is now time for it to be exploited, and we're inviting Europeans and Americans to look into Africa. It is, especially in Botswana, being known for our peace and stability, our fiscal discipline. It is a very, and the vast amount of space available for food production, green energy production. It is quite an appropriate place from which advanced technology, those companies which are advanced technologically can springboard from to access the greater African market.
So Botswana, Southern Africa, the continent of Africa,
yes,
open for business.
Yes.
Karen, I wonder what your take is on this. I mean, what do you see as the key global hotspots, but also the challenges that are going to be affecting international trade and investment?
I think part of the reason there's such a doom and gloom story is that we're in this interesting period where we're at the end of this business cycle that was bizarrely fast as the world closed and then reopened and sort of bumbled its way into what looks like a recession, certainly in North America and in Europe now going forward. But at the same time, we are at the end of some important secular forces that are also transformational and really will help us guide us in this next cycle. Probably the most important of those is moving from globalization to what we call at Bain post-globalization, which is a more fragmented world where trade and investment will have more barriers. Now, there are lots, it's easy to talk about the downsides of that, but I think the opportunities there are, we go from a world that was largely, scale was unlimited in many respects. We had free movement of goods. The larger you could get, the better. And that presented one set of opportunities. But as we move into a more fragmented post-global world, there'll be different opportunities, certainly in the private sector, to serve different markets that will have more localization, will have more focus domestically. Now, again, it's easy to bemoan industrial policy, and of course, China's always had industrial policy. The US started quickly out of the gate with the Inflation Reduction Act. But at the same time, I think this more fragmented world creates opportunities for different experiments in green energy, different ways of attacking agriculture and other commodities, and different business structures for trade that I think will be quite positive over this next cycle.
You talk about opportunities. So, Burak, let's talk about those opportunities and the green shoots. So what do you think they are, the things that are going to lift growth prospects? Is it China? Is it the United States? Or are there any particular emerging economies?
We all agree that the growth must be, first of all, sustainable, and secondly, inclusive, and third, it has to be resilient. And to achieve that target, of course, it's not easy, but it definitely should be inclusive, and all geographies should be aligned in this regards. So when we look at those the growth, for example, for the trade, last year the trading goods were below the forecasted growth, and for the next year the WTO expects that it will be 1.7%. This is nothing. So most probably, these new emerging industries will make a kind of difference, and of course, the services trade will make a difference. So when we look at those global hotspots, as the geographies, all those trends that we mentioned, longer-term trends like sustainability agenda, digitalization, and we all know that globally there is a labor challenge. I mean, we are talking about this great resignation and etc. It's all resulting in a huge supply chain restructuring globally. I think the next growth will be around this theme. So the global supply chains are changing. Different countries in different parts of the world, like in Asia, in Latin, in Africa, is emerging, and in our region, Türkiye is at the nexus of Africa, Europe, and Asia. We believe that Türkiye is taking the advantage of this new restructuring with given indicators like exports are growing very rapidly, economy is growing, and I think this will be the new theme. I mean, the restructuring of the global supply chains.
And Botswana's economy is growing as well. Those growth forecasts that have increased. I mean, are there any particular sectors that you're excited about?
Yes, tourism and manufacturing, as well as the pursuit of intellectual property, is something which we are in hot pursuit of, and it's one which has the potential of greatly growing the economy, but mainly on manufacturing. We have for a long time been an economy which was resource-based and not so much one focused on manufacturing, because it's a part of industrialization. The bigger industrialization pursuit which we have embarked upon as Southern African Customs Union and also as SADC and the whole of the African continent, we are seeking to industrialize. So we are working a great deal and also funding initiatives in manufacturing, and also creating a climate within which industrialization can flourish.
And in terms of investment, Karen, that's going to stoke growth, where's hot? What's not?
Well, I think when I just think about the context of this panel, one of the concerns that I have is when I think about the investment strategy that worked brilliantly since World War II to lift economies really out to transform them, it was export-led growth. I mean, that's what the Asian tigers, Japan out of World War II, China, all replicated that. And if we think about a fragmented world with workforces that are declining in China, in Europe, in the United States growing slowly, and that all points to automation. And there's been a lot of talk during this session here in Geneva about AI, but it's much more than that. It's human hand dexterity, it's sensors, all of which are disruptive. The discussion about reshoring, which has a lot of energy in North America, is predicated on automation. There simply isn't the labor to do that. And in a world where things are reshored, supply chains shift, but it's automated at the bottom of production, the question is, how do countries begin to climb that ladder of manufacturing without that labor arbitrage that was so effective before? And I think that's something that I'm really concerned about when I think about development strategies. Not many countries have the scale of India, both internally with markets and externally. And so that, I think, is when we think about growth hotspots, it points to North America, to China, to those industries. but other markets will have to be more creative in the strategies that they pursue.
So you're talking about being creative, you're talking about being more nimble. I'm thinking, Botswana very much focused on diamonds, but there are big investments in infrastructure, aren't there? So also in technology, you mentioned tourism already. Tell us about those and the potential there for regional partnerships.
It's mainly green technology, green energy. When we heard the whole world gravitating towards the abandonment of fossil fuel propelled machinery, we immediately set our sights on possibly playing a role in the production of electric machinery, electric vehicles. We accept that we are not in a position yet to manufacture a full vehicle, but in terms of harnesses and components, which are electric-based, that's what we are embarking upon, and we are looking more, have our sights on the wealth of minerals that we have deposits which can be useful in our support of the green technology. So we are really open. We also very much open to solar energy, because we receive about 3,200 hours of sunshine per annum. So it's another area which because we and Namibia are looking at. So it's an investment opportunity. But we are really hoping that there could be some research and innovation to make it more sustainable and less expensive to sustain the solar energy production. Because at present we do quite know that yes, it is well and good to the ears to embark upon, but the capital is quite a capital-intensive exercise, and there are challenges of storage of that kind of energy. So if there could be research, we are funding a lot of research and development. If there could be a breakthrough in the capacity to harness this energy and be a part of the greater scheme of the whole world of conducting our industrialization in a clean manner. So I'm really making an invitation to embark on green technology. We're not blessed with water, so we can't look into hydroelectric power. Wind, yes, to some degree in the southwestern part, but it's not as great as the sun opportunity that is there. So those are some of the things that are really be my contribution towards.
So some big investment opportunities there, scope for partnerships. I wonder what the investment picture's like, though, in Turkey. Because, look, you've got eye-watering inflation. You've also had the devastating earthquakes and the fallout about that. How can all of that maybe impact the longer-term growth and investment outlook?
First of all, we would like to thank the international community, especially the international business community, for supporting us, for standing with us during the earthquake, and we are in the recovery. Secondly, yeah, inflation was high. It is declining very rapidly. It's being tamed. Of course, it's a challenge for all the companies. But a country like Turkey, we are very flexible, agile, and I think we were able to adapt our business models and etc. quickly. And election, yeah, for sometimes, for emerging markets, it's like uncertainty, as you said. But I think for the case of Turkey, in the last 2 decades especially, we did many reforms. Our institutions are very strong. So for the investors, especially, we are speaking to international investors every day. They don't have any questions. In the recent weeks, we have closed many deals. For example, tomorrow morning, we are going to announce a new investment in an R&D center of a multinational, employing almost 1,000 people anyway. So I think that's not a big uncertainty. It's kind of functioning democracy thing. So when it comes to growth, if you look at the story of Turkey in the last 2 decades, compound annual growth rate is 5.4%. Consider the hiccups, ups and downs of the global economy. I think we managed to have a kind of remarkable growth. And this is what we hear all the time from international business community. Turkey is a resilient and fast-growing economy. Of course, one of the reasons is that our commitment to the reform agenda in the last 2 decades, and this is a continuous reform agenda, and we will continue that agenda. Secondly, we have a deep, competent and competitive talent pool within the country, especially when we consider the global labor challenge. I think this is a very solid value proposition. Lastly, as I mentioned, we are at the nexus of Europe, Asia, and Africa. But this is not just the geography, because we have been living in that geography for a long while. Especially in the 2 decades, We invested a lot in the infrastructure, energy, logistics, healthcare, and education. And sometimes when we speak about infrastructure in emerging markets, digital infrastructure is ignored sometimes. We have been investing in digital infrastructure as well. So in addition to that, with our successful policies, we managed to develop Türkiye as a powerhouse in the region. Türkiye now is a regional manufacturing hub. And we are driving our country to be an R&D hub in the region, to be a design house in the region. And all the global companies are now putting their regional management centers in Turkey. Just as an example, in Turkey we have more than 600 multinationals having their R&D offices. So we have around 100 multinational companies managing the region from Turkey. So these are the long-term fundamental value proposition of Turkey, and it will not change because of the short-term inflation. It will not be affected with the earthquake or election. Will not change it. So international investors are committed to our country, and we believe that it will continue. And this is the reason behind our successful growth.
Still to come here on the agenda, what kind of investments and where are needed to unlock new growth opportunities?
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
We can try out the wild and the crazy ideas.
Nothing can stop an idea whose time is coming. This idea is coming.
I actually feel quite comfortable in isolation.
We should all be very basic when we're trying to save the world.
Awesome!
We hope it will happen. We have to live in hope.
Welcome back to the agenda here in Geneva, and we can return now to my panel on just where growth is going to come from over the next decade. You mentioned, Karen, China before, and then they've said recently, right, they want to press the accelerator button when it comes to foreign diplomacy. How important do you think China is going to be to robust economic recovery and changing the investment picture to stoke growth?
Well, coming out of 2008, that China was the engine of growth that dragged the world out of the financial crisis. It's not going to be that engine this time. Even the recent GDP numbers, over 4%, still relatively disappointing for hot growth coming out of COVID. And I think that just shows some of the structural challenges that China has, and as they've said, trying to transition their model to a more consumer-led one, dealing with government debt that is accumulated both nationally and regionally. That doesn't mean that China isn't interesting for investors or doesn't have opportunities, but I don't see it as having that engine role pulling the world out of the global economy. And it's symbolic of a more multipolar world. There isn't a country at the apex that will have that position now or going forward.
Is there a region at the apex? Is there a sector at the apex?
there will be different regions that serve different roles. I think in this multipolar world, certainly we see one hub around China, another around the United States. That decoupling in terms of advanced technology is, I don't think, reversible in a meaningful way. But that doesn't preclude other parts of the world from having that sort of strength, talking about Türkiye or other areas. And I think, again, that's what's interesting. Is there an opportunity more regionalized to serve in a more localized interest? Saudi Arabia has done some very interesting investments in new energy, along with traditional fossil fuels. And Ricardo Hausmann, who's here with us, has noted that the more diversity in exports you have, the better your development path. And so as we see countries begin to discuss how to find that diversity, there could be new hotspots. But I wouldn't say, as an investor or someone who works with investors, I certainly wouldn't say, put it all on black with any country that's on the planet right now.
Gosh, you're talking about the global economy and investing like a game of Russian roulette. Or
Not
roulette.
Russian
No,
roulette,
roulette. Forgive me.
So
you talked about investing in new technology, but I wonder where you see those new investment opportunities to unlock growth, because there isn't a one-size-fits-all, is there? There really isn't. And different regions, different countries have different challenges.
Definitely. I mean, all the economies are in a different stage. So we have to, and their competitive advantages are different. Sometimes focusing on some verticals may mislead us. When we encounter such question, I try to focus on some trends instead of some verticals. And of course, we value green economy, green energy, and etc. And we talked about the period that we had in Türkiye in the last 2 decades under the leadership of President Erdogan. A very big advantage of us, he is able to read the global trends very quickly, and he is making those decisions. I mean, our story of green energy started 15 years ago, for example. Because of that reason, what we are seeing now, especially for the FDI inflows in the last 3 years. Let me give you some specific figures. 1/3 of the investments are coming from supply chain restructuring, and 1/3 is coming from the technology startups. This is the digitalization of the economy. And when I refer to supply chain related investments, first of all, companies are increasing their capacity within the country through expansions, through greenfield investments. They are bringing their vendors or sometimes clients to Türkiye. And another trend is to, it has been discussed that, now we are talking about a more regionalization in the economy, and reshoring, nearshoring, or friendshoring, whatever the name is. And when we look at the Turkey's effort, we are trying to create a region of stability, and we are trying to integrate our geography, our neighborhood. We are ratifying new free trade agreements, and etc. So this regional resilience and stability is quite important for us. So multinationals would like to use this opportunity to strengthen their supply chain. So the companies who were manufacturing in Turkey, now they are bringing R&D, post-manufacturing and pre-manufacturing activities to Turkey. So because this is important, to make sure that their supply chain is functioning very well. A few words on the digitalization side. I think all the countries has to transform their industries with the new trends. I mean, automation, digitalization. This is a fact. So just another example, for example, in Turkey, we have a very strong automotive industry. I mean, we started manufacturing automobiles in 1960s. And now the automobile world is, e-mobility. It is integrated, it is electrified, and etc. So our policies are to encourage, those companies to catch, up with these trends and transform themselves. So my short answer is, again, the net trend, to Turkey, let's say, the supply chain changes are a major driving force of the FDIs. And secondly, that, digitalization of the businesses, including those technology startups, are major drivers of investments and growth.
So talking about those trends, innovation, ideas, implementation, these are things that forums like this have come to be known for. I mean, what should policymakers be doing? What should businesses in emerging and developing economies do to turn all of these ideas into action?
Policy, from policymakers' perspective, you got to pass policies which make it easy for investments to take root, and once taken root, for it to be sustained. You got to pass policies which give assurance of safety of investments within territories, investment protection. But obviously, from the African context, we do things collectively in Africa. Our policies, by and large, are informed by what the African Continental Free Trade Area, the various agreements that come out of, or protocols which come out of it, say. So it is very important to give assurance to investments, and also have reduction or elimination of threats to security and peace. Have laws which are accessible and open, and have courts which are, or judicial systems which are independent, to which investors can look when they feel aggrieved within the land within which they would have come in and invested. So I think those are really the things that we need as policymakers be looking into. But it's not just a question of having a policy. You've got to have to also follow it up. Yeah. Follow it up and implement, because many times we find ourselves with policies and laws, but the responsible leadership, simply giving it out and rolling out to the public, but then not ensuring or making sure that those that your levers, the ones with which you implement that policy or law, they're actually working.
Thought through.
They're actually working. Yeah. We need to keep an eye on it to be sure that these policies are not just many of the documents which get churned out, good to the ears, and then get put away in shelves.
Listen, I want to use the last few minutes to see if there's anyone in our studio audience here who've got some questions for you.
My name is Dağlioğlu. I run the coordination of the African Continental Free Trade for public and private sector in Nigeria. Going forward, how do we go forward with digitalization and automation, but how do we also solve unemployment? Where are we going to create jobs for these young people if we start bringing automation into it?
Let me just get the panel to quickly go through that, because our time is running out. So I think, Burak, you want just a quick fire response into that? How can you solve all of these?
This is a very big debate, and what we see, the reskilling, it was discussed a lot. If you reskill your people, according to the new business conditions, you don't have to fire anybody. So it is doable, and we witnessed that in many cases. This is happening in Türkiye. So we are preserving employment at the same time. For example, last year we generated 1.8 million jobs in Türkiye. So this is possible, I think. While digitalizing your economy, you can create jobs.
Karen, it's a challenge.
It is a challenge. When you think about the population, it's not a pyramid, it's a kite in Europe, and the lack of the bottom of the pyramid in North America, that's the incentive to speed up entry-level jobs. The bulge of population is in actually 35 to 45, that middle management. So automation solves a problem they face. Whereas to your point, in Nigeria and in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, when you have a proper population pyramid, you don't want to be truncating those jobs. I don't have a good answer, but I agree with you that that's a challenge. Over time, new sectors emerge, but in the transition period, that does represent a real headwind.
I think intra-African trade, which we are encouraging at AFCFTA, once we increase trade within Africa itself, it may well be, or maybe result in automation not being after all, such a challenge. Because unemployment at present is escalated by the fact that, by the fact that the way in which Africa has been trading for a long time. We've been really exporting raw materials into Europe and the Americas and not adding value.
I'm going to have to cut you short, but big thanks to Mmusi Kgafela, to Burak Dağlioğlu, and to Karen Harris from Bain & Co. It's been upbeat, it's been interesting, and I think that we've all got a lot to take home with us. You can watch every episode of The Agenda in full on CGTN Europe's YouTube channel. And for exclusive extra content from me, my guests and the rest of the team, don't forget to check out @The Agenda Show on TikTok. Coming soon on the agenda, the longevity challenge. How do you solve the problem of an ageing global population? But for now, from me, Juliet, Mann, and from all of the Agenda team here in Geneva, goodbye.